The history of mankind goes back approximately 200,000 years, beginning with the rise of the anatomically modern Homo sapiens in Africa. Over the millennia, humans have changed civilizations, risen and fallen, and today we are left to discover remains 200,000 years old, if not more, from one of the most mysterious places in ancient history to a years-old mathematical method. Welcome to a new video. Here are the 15 most incredible archaeological artifact finds. Number 15. The site of the original Library of Alexandria. The Great Library of Alexandria, if it were still standing, history itself could be rewritten. Established in the 3rd century BC, this library held most of the knowledge of the ancient world. This place was where scholars, scientists, and philosophers from all corners of the Mediterranean gathered, making Alexandria the intellectual capital of the world. The library's collection was huge. Estimates suggest it contained between 200,000 and 400,000 scrolls at its peak. These scrolls covered a wide range of subjects, including mathematics, astronomy, medicine, literature, and philosophy. All the writings of Homer, Plato, and all the greatest minds of antiquity were housed in the library seen below. During the rule of Timai III Uries, a decree was issued that any ship calling at Alexandria had to hand over their books. The originals were kept in the library and the copies were returned to the ships. This aggressive collecting policy turned the library's collection into a treasure trove of ancient writing. It was discovered that this would drastically change what we know about history. However, the library was destroyed in 48 BC. It was devastated by a fire. Although the exact origin of this disaster is still debated, the general consensus is that Julius Caesar supposedly set fire to ships in the harbor of Alexandria, and the fire spread, engulfing parts of the city, including the library. But in 2004, archaeologists believe they found traces of the library in the Bran region of Alexandria. They found 13 lecture halls that could have held up to 5,000 students. This find is groundbreaking because we have never found anything from the library. Unfortunately, there is no trace of the library's existence before this discovery. Unfortunately, no other structures, scrolls, or artifacts were discovered in the region, making it difficult to determine if this was where the Great Library once stood. Number 14. The Great Sculptures of the Parthenon. The Great Sculptures of the Parthenon, often referred to as the Elgin Marbles, are among the greatest works of art made during antiquity. Dating from between 447 and 432 BC. These sculptures were originally part of the Parthenon Temple on the Acropolis in Athens, and were crafted under the direction of Phidias, one of the most famous sculptors of antiquity. The sculptures depicted scenes from Greek mythology, including epic battles between gods and giants, Greeks and Amazons, and the famous Pantheon procession, a great festival in honor of the goddess Athena. The sculptures were strategically placed to tell stories in honor of the Greek gods. However, in the early 19th century, the British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire removed about half of the surviving sculptures from the Parthenon. Of course, this received significant backlash. Despite Lord Eland's claim that he had permission from the Ottoman authorities, then ruling Athens, these sculptures were transported to Britain, where they eventually became part of the collection of the British Museum. Today, the Parthenon sculptures are divided between the British Museum and the Acropolis Museum in Athens, sparking a long-running debate over their rightful home. Greece has repeatedly requested the return of these cultural treasures, but to no avail. Number 13. One of the most famous temples of gods, Temple of Zeus in Egypt. Ruler of Mount Olympus, Jupiter, god of lightning and thunder, king of the gods. Zeus is revered in Greek mythology and is one of the most recognized gods. Despite his flaws, Zeus was seen as the defender of justice and order. He was often called upon to settle disputes between gods and humans, and his judgments were considered final. Zeus's influence extended far beyond Greece. His cult spread throughout the Mediterranean, and his image was adopted by the Romans, who identified him with their god Jupiter. A discovery in Egypt also proved that Zeus's influence extended as far as ancient Egypt. Archaeologists in the Sinai Peninsula unearthed one of the temples dedicated to Zeus in 2022. This temple dedicated specifically to Zeus combines the worship of Zeus with instances of a local deity associated with the mount, instances in Syria. It is no wonder that to this day Zeus and Greek mythology are still revered by many around the world. Number 12. The bust of Nefertiti. Nefertiti, one of the most famous names in ancient Egypt, remains enigmatic more than 3,000 years after her reign. As the great royal wife of the pharaoh, Nefertiti was among the crucial figures in one of Egypt's most controversial and transformative periods, the Amarna period. In her lifetime, Nefertiti served not only as queen consort, but also as co-regent, and yet somehow her existence was deliberately erased, which is why her origins remain unknown to this day, which is why the discovery of her sculpture in 1912 remains one of the most important archaeological finds. Unearthed by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt at the Talara site, the bust is a masterpiece of ancient Egyptian art. The artifact is believed to have been created around 1340 BC, and was probably created by the sculptor, although somehow this sculpture made its way to Germany, where it remains to this day despite Egypt's strong insistence on the repatriation of the artifacts to their homeland. Number 11. 3,400-year-old colossal heads. The ancient colossal heads are huge stone sculptures that can weigh up to 50 tons and measure up to 9 feet. As the name suggests, these sculptures are basically giant heads created by one of the earliest complex societies in the Americas that flourished between 1400 and 400 BC. These sculptures were found primarily in the Gulf Coast region of Mexico, specifically in the modern states of Veracruz and Tabasco. Each of these heads is believed to represent a ruler who reigned over the society back then. People transported huge blocks of stone for over 50 million years before they were carved. Why did this society invest so much work into these colossal sculptures? Perhaps in relation to ancestor worship or other religious practices, given how little we know about them, we may never really know the answer. Number 10. The funerary mask of King Tutankhamun. The ancient Egyptians created many brilliant structures and artifacts, but perhaps the most impressive of all is the funerary bust of King Tutankhamun. Can you believe this was created at a time when modern tools were not available? This artifact was created from over 22 pounds of solid gold and adorned with inlays of semi-precious stones such as lapis lazuli, quartz, and obsidian. These gems were not arbitrarily set against each other. Together they form a chilling visage. The eyes are inlaid with quartz and obsidian, giving them a piercing gaze that seems almost alive, while the intricate details of the eyebrows and eyelids are made from lapis lazuli, which symbolizes the heavens to the ancient Egyptians. This mask would ensure that the young ruler would be recognized by the gods in the afterlife. The headdress with its characteristic golden blue stripes represents the Nemes, a royal headdress worn by pharaohs. The false beard is a symbol of divinity, indicating that the pharaoh was to be seen as a god in the afterlife. The back of the mask is also inscribed with a spell from the Egyptian Book of the Dead, meant to protect the king's body and guide it safely into the afterlife. It is no wonder that the young pharaoh's funerary mask is now recognized as one of the symbols of ancient Egypt. Number 9. The oldest shoe in the world. In 2010, archaeologists discovered a perfectly preserved leather shoe dating back over 5,500 years in a cave in Armenia. This is the oldest leather shoe ever found, but it contained a rather stinky secret. Equivalent to a modern 7, the shoe was made from a single piece of cowhide sewn together with leather laces. It may look rudimentary, but it is actually considered an excellent creation compared to other things created during its time. However, its underside also had a rather stinky smell, like secret sheep dung. Strangely, the animal species might have contributed to the preservation of the leather materials. The poop that likely came from the sheep and goats that were herded into the cave created an anaerobic environment that prevented the leather from decomposing. As a result, this humble piece of ancient footwear has survived millennia, allowing researchers to study the footwear today. Number 8. The oldest cheese in the world. Spoiler alert, this cheese is not edible. Sometime between 2013 and 2014, a team of archaeologists found some broken jars while excavating the tomb of Thomas in Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt. Among these jars was one containing a whitish, solid mass that might now resemble a piece of rock, but is actually an ancient cheese. The oldest chemical analysis ever found revealed that the cheese was made from a mixture of cow's milk and sheep's or goat's milk that was made 3,200 years ago, and as unappetizing as it may seem, it once graced the table of Egypt's elite. However, you won't be able to taste it according to modern health regulations. It turned out that this cheese contains traces of a bacteria that causes brucellosis, the disease that plagued humans and animals, making the cheese not only the oldest ever found, but possibly one of the earliest examples of foodborne illnesses. Number 7. Bodies with coins in their mouths. The ancient Greeks believed that on their journey to the afterlife, they would meet Khan. He was the righteous one who transported souls across the river poles. According to legend, the dead needed to pay Khan for safe passage. Without this payment, their souls would be condemned to wander the banks of the poles for eternity without being able to reach the underworld. The required payment was a coin known as OB. These coins were traditionally placed in the mouth or eyes of the deceased during burial to make payment. This ritual dates back to at least the 5th century BC in Greece, however. It turns out that this practice was also carried out. Elsewhere in Poland, for example, workers discovered a centuries-old cemetery where the remains of children dating back to the 16th and early 17th centuries were buried. Interestingly, all of these children had coins or oles placed in their mouths, most of which were minted during the reign of King Sigmund II, who ruled Poland from 1587 to 1632. This suggests that the traditions carried on by the Greeks lasted much longer than we initially thought. Number 6. A centuries-old skeleton with a prosthetic hand. In 2023, an archaeologist in Germany discovered a rather unusual find in a small town just north of Munich. A centuries-old skeleton with a metal prosthetic hand. Archaeologists believed the skeleton belonged to a man who lived between 1450 and 1620. The prosthesis made of iron and other metals replaced 4 fingers on the man's left hand that had likely been amputated during his lifetime. The prosthesis itself was carefully crafted with each finger molded from sheet metal and arranged to mimic the natural resting position of the human hand. Prosthetics from this era are rare. Around 50 similar devices are known across Central Europe, which is why each and every discovery is considered important. Number 5. Hammurabi's law code dating back to around 1754 BC. The Hammurabi Code is one of the oldest and longest deciphered writings in the world. It comprises 20082 laws covering a wide range of topics from trade and property rights to family, subjects, and criminal justice. The laws were inscribed in Akkadian, the language of the Babylonians, and steel. It was placed in a public space so that all citizens could see the rules governing their lives. One of the most iconic and recognized laws is the law of retribution, emphasized by the statement 1 IE for 1 IE. However, it is not as simple as it seems. For example, the punishment for a crime often depended on the social status of both the victim and the perpetrator. If a noble harmed another noble, the retribution was direct. But if a no-one harmed a person of lower rank, the punishment would be less severe. While Hammurabi's code might seem harsh by modern standards, it was one of the few established rules that were followed in ancient times. Number 4. Chess from the Isle of Lewis. On a windswept beach in the Lewis Hall in Scotland, one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries of the 19th century was the chess set from the Isle of Lewis. These artifacts were discovered in 1831 and consist of 93 pieces carved from whale teeth. They date back to the 12th century and probably originated in Norway. Unlike the chess pieces we usually see today, each of these pieces is unique with its own expressions and details. Kings sit solemnly on their thrones, queens rest their chins on their hands contemplatively, and bishops are depicted in their ecclesiastical robes. Now, I don't know about you, but I find their human expressions quite creepy. These pieces reflect the social hierarchy and roles of different figures in medieval northern society, from the clergy to the warriors. Now the mystery of these pieces lies in how it ended up on a remote Scottish island after all these pieces arrived from Norway. Were these pieces part of the cargo of a ship that had fallen into the ocean? The answer remains unknown to this day. Number 03. The oldest confirmed statue. You are looking at the oldest known sculpture in the world, known as the Lion Man of Hollenstein-Stottel. The Lion Man was carved from mammoth ivory over 40,000 years ago and is the oldest and most significant example of ancient art. This statue was first discovered in the Hollenstein-Stottel cave in 1939. However, due to the outbreak of World War II, it was not immediately studied. After all, there were more pressing concerns. It was not until decades later that archaeologists had the opportunity to study the piece. Beginning as a rather complicated task of piecing together hundreds of fragments to reconstruct the half-human, half-lion figure that stands almost a foot tall. This sculpture is believed to have been a product of the Aryan culture that thrived during the Upper Paleolithic. The human body of the figure with the covenant head suggests that the people who created it had a profound capacity for imagination, symbolism, and spirituality. This shows that humans during that period not only created objects and beings they saw, but also had the ability to imagine things. It is believed that this particular half-human, half-lion figure was part of shamanic rituals. Now, what is more surprising is the fact that this figure was carved with rudimentary tools made of stone, proving that humans, even thousands of years ago, were quite adept at the art. Number 02. Copper. Spain was ruled by a woman. The Ivory Lady, a tomb unearthed near Seville, Spain in 2008, remains one of the country's most important archaeological discoveries. When the tomb was first discovered, researchers thought they unearthed the grave of a man dating back to the Copper Age. Due to the poor state of preservation of the skeletal remains, however, thanks to recent advances in genetic testing, researchers studying peptides in the skeleton's tooth enamel confirmed its true gender. The burial site of the Ivory Lady was extraordinarily full of lavish tombs. Items such as ivory tusks, a rock crystal dagger, and even ostrich eggs were found. This shows that the Ivory Lady had power when she was alive. It is likely that the Ivory Lady was among the rulers of the Iberian Copper Age. Unlike other cultures where power was often inherited, the Ivory Lady's status appears to have been earned through personal achievement. Another opulent tomb was discovered nearby, containing the remains of at least 15 women researchers believe these individuals may have been connected to the Iron Lady, possibly her descendants or religious specialists. Number 01. The oldest decimal multiplication table. 3000 BC, the Mesopotamian states of its Akkad and Assyria, followed by ancient Egypt, the Latin state of Alba. These are the roots of mathematics. However, many other civilizations, such as the Greeks, also made significant contributions in Asia, India, and China, were among those who contributed greatly to the field. One of the greatest vestiges of ancient China's contribution to mathematics was recently unearthed by researchers. An ancient mathematical tool dating back over 2,300 years to around 305 BC, during the Warring States period, the people of ancient China used waterless bamboo strips. These strips, inscribed with Chinese characters, are essentially a multiplication table. Unlike the simple multiplication tables we learn in school, this table could handle whole numbers and fractions, allowing calculations up to 99.5. The table is arranged with factors ranging from 0.5 to 90 and probably served a practical purpose for bureaucrats and merchants of the time, when it came to money, of course, particularly taxes and payroll. This again shows the advanced level of mathematical knowledge in ancient China, particularly using a base 10 system long before such methods were widely adopted elsewhere in the world. We've reached the end of this video. Tell us what you think in the comments box. If you liked the video, give it a like, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss future videos like this one. See you next time.